In the 5th century BC, Greece stood at the height of its power. The mighty city-states of Athens and Sparta ruled the land, but their dominance was about to be tested in a brutal war that would change history forever. It was a war of strategy, betrayal, and devastation. A war that would bring down empires and redefine the course of Western civilization. This is the story of the Peloponnesian War. To understand the Peloponnesian War, we must first understand Greece at the time. Unlike powerful kingdoms with single rulers, Greece was a land of independent city-states, or polis. Two of these stood above the rest: Athens, a naval power known for democracy, philosophy, and wealth, and Sparta, a disciplined warrior society built on military supremacy. These two superpowers were allies during the Persian Wars, but peace was never their destiny. Athens grew in influence, leading the Delian League, a coalition of city-states that contributed ships and funds. Sparta, on the other hand, led the Peloponnesian League, an alliance of oligarchic states who feared Athenian expansion. Tensions rose as Athens imposed its dominance, using its fleet to control trade and expand its empire. Sparta and its allies saw this as a direct threat. Athens grew wealthy, its navy patrolling the Aegean, enforcing its will upon smaller states. Meanwhile, Sparta remained a land-based powerhouse, its elite warriors ready to defend their way of life at any cost. But this war was not just about power, it was about ideology. Athens championed democracy while Sparta upheld oligarchy. Their struggle was as much about governance as it was about military supremacy. The fate of Greece rested in the hands of these two titans, and neither was willing to back down. The war began with Sparta launching an invasion into Athenian territory. Under King Archidamus II, the Spartan army marched into Attica, burning farmland and villages in an attempt to starve Athens into submission. But Athens, under the leadership of Pericles, had a different strategy. Pericles ordered the Athenian people to retreat behind the massive walls of the city and rely on their superior navy for supplies. Athens had the most powerful fleet in Greece, while Sparta's strength was its army. This made for a long and grueling conflict. Then, disaster struck Athens, not from Sparta, but from within. A deadly plague swept through the crowded city, killing thousands, including Pericles himself. Without its visionary leader, Athens fell into political chaos. The death toll was staggering, and the once proud city was left reeling. Despite these setbacks, Athens continued to fight, launching naval raids along the Peloponnesian coast. But after a decade of bloodshed, both sides agreed to a temporary truce, the Peace of Nicaeus, signed in 421 BC. However, this peace was fragile, riddled with distrust and unfinished business. The war was far from over. In 415 BC, Athens made a catastrophic decision. They launched a massive military expedition to Sicily, aiming to conquer the city of Syracuse, a Spartan ally. Led by Alcibiades and Nicias, this campaign would prove to be one of the biggest disasters in Greek history. What seemed like a grand opportunity quickly turned into a nightmare. The Athenians underestimated their enemy. The Spartans sent reinforcements, and after months of brutal fighting, the entire Athenian fleet was trapped and destroyed in 413 BC. Thousands of Athenian soldiers were either killed or sold into slavery. The once mighty Athens had suffered an irreparable blow. This devastating defeat shattered Athenian morale and marked the beginning of the end for the once mighty city-state. The empire that had dominated the Aegean was now crumbling, and the enemies of Athens could smell blood in the water. Sparta, now backed by Persian gold, built a navy to challenge Athenian dominance at sea. The Spartan general Lysander led a series of decisive battles, culminating in the Battle of Aegospotami in 405 BC. In one swift move, the Spartan fleet destroyed the remaining Athenian navy. The war had reached its climax. With no fleet to supply them, Athens was completely cut off. In 404 BC, after a brutal siege, Athens surrendered. The walls of the city were torn down, its democracy was dismantled, and Sparta emerged as the supreme power of Greece. But Sparta's dominance would come at a cost. The Peloponnesian War left Greece in ruins. Cities were destroyed, economies collapsed, and tens of thousands perished. But despite Sparta's victory, its dominance would not last long. The war had drained Greece of its strength, leaving it vulnerable to future threats. Only a few decades later, Greece would fall into further turmoil, paving the way for the rise of a new power, Macedon. And from its ranks would emerge a leader who would change the world forever, Alexander the Great. The Peloponnesian War was more than just a battle between Athens and Sparta. It was a lesson in power, ambition, and the consequences of war. It showed that even the greatest civilizations can fall when consumed by conflict. And perhaps, in studying the past, we can learn how to avoid the mistakes that led to the downfall of Greece's greatest city-states. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more historical deep dives. Until next time, this is Time's Battlefield.